Hi, I'm Richard L. Weaver II. I'm the president and CEO of And Then Some Publishing. And recently we published 3 books by Edgar Willis. The first book was How to Be Funny on Purpose, Creating and Consuming Humor. Now, the primary features, there are really 3 primary features of this book. First, it gives a history of humor in the media. Secondly, it offers a tremendous number of jokes and stories and humor. But third, and probably most important in this book, is How to Be Funny on Purpose. Dr. Willis gives specific directions, suggestions for creating humor, creating jokes. For example, when I first found myself reading this, I really enjoyed it, and I started writing jokes, which I do not do. But the suggestions are so specific and so good, so clear, that you begin writing jokes easily. The second book that we published, Dr. Willis's book, is called Civilian in an Ill-Fitting Uniform. It's a memoir of World War II. One of the main features of this book, besides giving you the experience, the episodes, the stories that Dr. Willis had during the war, it puts those stories, those experiences, into a larger context, the context of the war. So from reading this book alone, you not only get insight into Dr. Willis's experiences, but you get a tremendous broad overview of the war and what was going on during the war. The third book we published, Dr. Willis's, more recently, is called Moss on the Ivory Tower. Significantly different book than the previous 2. Moss on the Ivory Tower is a novel of mystery and intrigue. It's fiction. We are fortunate today to have Dr. Willis with us, and what I'd like to do is talk to him about writing, his writing career, writing in general, giving suggestions perhaps to new writers. First, let's just start with the basics. Where did you learn to write? How did you learn to write, Dr. Willis?
I have no idea. Well, when I was a sophomore in high school, I had a very, very good writing teacher, and I wrote some things that he liked, and it sort of made me think maybe I can write. I'm not sure, but maybe it gave me confidence, and I went on from there.
Was that an English teacher in high school?
Yeah, it was a class in English.
Okay.
Let's see, I was about 13 years old.
My goodness.
Second year sophomore. And I wrote some things that he liked very much, and that, I think, gave me the idea that I may be able to write something.
Okay, then an obvious second question would be, where did you test the idea? I mean, you obviously found out from him he liked some of the stuff that you wrote. Where did you test the idea? Where did you then write again to know that, yeah, this is something I can do?
Well, the usual compositions that high school students are asked to write, I presume those helped me. But then a publisher came along when I became a professor at the University of San Jose State, and asked me if I would write a textbook, and I wrote it, and it was published by the Oxford University Press, and
very prestigious.
A reviewer of my book in England wrote that the book was fine in terms of presenting information, but there was no sense of the author's presence. And that had a great effect on me. I thought, well, from now on I'm going to make myself obvious as an author, and that was a great help to me.
Were you able to write a second edition of that book in order to accomplish that?
Actually, that book, no, but I wrote a second edition where I joined a couple of other people in writing a second edition of a book.
Does writing come easy? Does writing come easy for you, or is it really difficult?
It depends. The book on humor that you mentioned, that was the easiest book I've ever written, because I had, through many years before that, been giving lectures on humor around the United States for the Michigan Alumni Association. And so it just flowed. It just came out like that very easily because I was so familiar with the ideas. Okay.
I'm going to go back just a little bit before the high school teacher had an influence on you. Obviously, somewhere along the line, you learned English technique, writing technique, language.
Well, when I was preparing to be a high school teacher in history, which was my major as an undergraduate, and there was a high school teacher who was very influential in teaching me the organization of ideas, and that helped me a lot in my writing. She was excellent, outstanding. I can't remember her name now, but she was a very beneficial influence on me.
Okay. In a sense, you're going back to your roots, and that's the nature of my next question. If you were making suggestions to a beginning writer, what would you suggest as some of the preliminaries, some of the basics, some of the foundational ideas that would help a starting person, a beginner, start to establish themselves or start to learn the basics of writing?
Well, I don't know that I can think of any particular ones. The thing that I would say, when I look at a novel, and I may be unique these days, I look for a story. So I think that the beginning writer, in my view, from my point of view, should be thinking first, do I have a story? And in my view, some of the current fiction writers don't. Many of them don't have a story.
I'm going back a little bit even farther now, one step earlier. Were you read to as a child? Did your parents have lots of books around? Were books part of your life so that you felt comfortable with books and reading as you developed as a child?
When I was 7 years old, my father took me to the library, and from that point on I read extensively.
So you really had developed a vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very influential in that he brought me to the library, and we would go to the library together to pick out books.
Now you have
and I continued to read, and the quality of the books, I hope.
Who guided those choices then?
I did.
In other words, well, but you have to get that information from somewhere. Did your parents help guide you in terms of quality writing?
When I was a child, I liked fairy stories, and that's perfectly natural for a child. And I remember my father said, "You don't like that," and then he began to introduce me to authors like Captain Marryat, who wrote novels about the British Navy, and Geoffrey Farnell, and other writers like he introduced me to those authors.
Now you have done an enormous amount of writing. You've written articles and speeches and your college textbooks. You've also written these 3 books I just introduced. What kind of writing is the most fun for you? That brings you the most joy?
Well, I think the kind of writing that you find in the book on humor is the most fun for me, as I hope for other people. And I hope this novel will be the same, in that it will catch people's interest and carry them along to the end.
Go ahead.
And I like the way it develops. I think it develops so that it seems to be developing naturally. It's not something that you're just thinking up.
And it's not forced.
And it's not forced. I think it comes along, and it comes along in a unexpected way at some points, and at other times it provides satisfaction to expectation.
Now, I'm not trying to put an idea into your head, but having read How to Be Funny on Purpose, one of the things I think that really made it interesting for you especially was you had collected humorous stories, anecdotes, jokes, virtually all of your life, and you started in the media.
Right.
So you were looking for them with purpose.
Right. Right. And I kept a file of them when I saw.
So part of the joy of writing How to Be Funny on Purpose was collating all this, synthesizing all of this tremendous wealth of knowledge, wealth of information that you had collected, and putting it into some kind of codified, organized book.
Good.
And that was fun.
Good. That's stated well for me.
Now, let's talk about making suggestions for beginning writers. If you were suggesting to a writer who had not done the kind of writing that you have done, the extensiveness of the writing, what would be your suggestion? Where would you tell them to start? You said to start with a story.
I think start with personal experience.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the more personal
and actually, all writing comes out of personal experience eventually.
Are you a believer, as many say, that the best writing is rewriting?
Yes. Shakespeare, at one time, somebody said about him that he just wrote it down for the first time and never did any rewriting. And recent research has shown that he worked on Hamlet for all of his life, and he kept rewriting it. And I think rewriting is something that you have to face in order to reach the kind of quality that you're hoping for. You can't just put it down and then say that's it. You have to look at it and say, I can make it better by doing this or that.
So would you say that the more experience you have as a writer, the more you understand that concept?
I think so. I think so.
And the more you develop and polish and hone your ideas.
I hope so.
And even if you're a great writer,
which I'm not.
Well, but even if you have had the extensive experience that you have had, you don't just write an idea and leave it forever. That's not the way you write an idea.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
But what was the best atmosphere that you wrote in? What did you have a special place, a special time, a special schedule for writing?
I didn't, because I had other obligations as a teacher and as an administrator of the department I chaired. So it was when I had time to do it, and when I had the motivation to do it that I did. And I can't point to any particular kind of situation that was. It
was a matter of working it in between all of the other responsibilities that you had.
And I think that's the way it is with a lot of people. They have other things they have to do, and they have to put their writing in at opportune moments.
In all of your writing, were there any books or guidebooks that you used to help develop yourself, to help instruct yourself on proper usage? Were there any books at all that you depended on throughout your writing career?
I can't think of any books, but I had some people in the publishing houses who were influential in making suggestions about books they were publishing.
Did you ever depend on Strunk and White's Elements of Style?
Everybody did.
I mean, that was the guidebook.
I was one of them.
Of course, that was the guidebook. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Willis, for your talk on writing here. Again, the three books he's written with and then some publishing was How to Be Funny on Purpose, Civilian in an Ill-Fitting Uniform, and his more recent book, Moss on the Ivory Tower. All three books can be found at Amazon.com.